Hello and welcome to Series 2 of the Figuring Things Out podcast. I'm your host, Will Brown. Thank you so much for listening. Our second series explores the process of recovery, in which we speak to 5 wonderful humans from various fields in order to uncover the truths and personal experiences behind injury, motivation, and mental health recovery. This podcast is a self-funded project. If you like what we do, please think about sharing it with your friends and even supporting us on our new Patreon. For now, on to today's guest. Good morning and welcome to the podcast. Today I have Mr. Tom Merrick, the bodyweight warrior, the YouTube extraordinaire, and someone who's possibly one of my oldest friends in the sphere, which we will get to later. Tom, it's very lovely of you to be here with me this morning for a cup of tea on a Thursday morning. You've gone from millions of followers on YouTube and all these kinds of amazing successes and then renovating 3 houses now, and you're here with me. How do you feel?
Feels like old times, mate.
Feels like old times indeed, yeah. How are you doing? How's life?
Life is good. It's been a bit of a chaotic couple of years, but I feel like I'm back on I've taken a few different directions and then it's all ended up back in the same place, and I feel like I'm working towards where I want to be again.
Good. And so last time we were, I guess, talking, you were very much moving through the YouTube sphere. You were kind of pushing the channel, The Bodyweight Warrior. And it seems like lately you've been posting a lot more of this renovating houses type project. I'd love to know a bit more about what's going on there. Do you have some kind of vision for yourself that you're...
I guess I had kind of like, I'm going to say a quarter life crisis, but yeah, basically, when I bought my first place and I was doing this as a job, and you know, I was like having to pay a mortgage and bills and support myself fully, and a girlfriend at that time, and I was like, kind of, you know, what happens if I can't do this? You know, what if I get injured? What if what if I'm no longer relevant? And you know, that's certainly something that's just going to happen eventually over time. There's new people who come into the space. You know, it's pretty standard, and I'm fine with that. So I was like, I probably should learn another skill, because you and I both did design, but you know, if you're not spending time in that space, you very quickly lose the relevance of the skills as well. So I couldn't really fall back on that. The other thing that I was very passionate about was architecture or property. That was actually what I originally applied to do at university, and I swapped last minute to doing just standard design because I wanted something a bit more broad. And I don't want to do 7 years at university. So yeah. Anyway, I basically I started doing some smaller bits and pieces, you know, standard sort of decorating stuff, and that sort of led on to fitting bathrooms, fitting kitchens, just doing a bit of everything really. And it's got much the same enjoyment as working on any sort of physical practice or any skill. You know, you've got to be consistent. You've got to understand the process, and it's something you get better at with practice. And it's also like it's a physical challenge as well. It's like problem solving. A lot of times when you're doing movement of any kind, even if it's more basic like me who just does sets and reps, or abstract like yourself, like it's a problem that you pose to your body, and your body has to then solve that problem through space. So yeah, I enjoyed the problem solving aspect of like, how do I fit these things together, and how do I, you know, connect up, make it work, make it structurally sound, etc. So yeah, and I got carried away with the thought that I would no longer be making YouTube videos in a few years' time, and I should find something else to do with my life just in case. And then, yeah, 3 houses, 3 properties, and 3 years later, YouTube has grown massively. I still kind of kept that, obviously, like I was, you know, basically splitting my time about 50-50. And yeah, I've kind of been like, cool, I've learned kind of what, maybe, you know, if I have to do that at the future, I will be able to do that. But you know, I feel like it would be a waste to just chuck everything away. Like I worked on the YouTube and going into this space, like it's something that I loved, and I still do love doing for like 10 years. So I was like, it's such a waste just to like chuck it away just because I'm scared that, it's almost like that, oh, if you don't try, you can't fail sort of thing,
Mm,
you know? So
mm,
I
yeah.
was, basically I started YouTube at a point in which it was much less of a career opportunity. And I think the competition was much lower. Nowadays, like people who make YouTube videos make crazy good stuff. And
Mm,
I saw the level that people were producing videos at, and just, I wasn't sure that I could
mm.
compete and make stuff of equal value. So, you know, rather than
Is
taking
that
on the challenge, I thought I would do something else. But
yeah?
I'm prepared.
I think 3 houses is definitely in getting carried away. In 3 years, that's mental, mate. To the level that you've renovated as well, you haven't just kind of changed a few things and painted a few walls. You've literally knocked down and renovated the whole interior structure of these places from what I've seen. Like you've completely done everything.
Yeah,
Have you?
it's definitely got progressively more intense.
You can see that, yeah. Have you had a mentor or someone that's been there to guide you, or have you just gone on YouTube and YouTubed how
Uh,
to tear down a house?
I would say it's much the same way as I learned a lot of the training stuff. Like I learned a lot through reading stuff online. Like that's the thing that's amazing about YouTube. Like if you need anything, somebody's made a video about them going through that process and solving it.
Mm,
So the same with building. Like I learned a lot of stuff initially. I've also just got friends locally that I've built up through doing this work. And you'd be surprised at how many people are like, uh, you know, can I pay you to help me do this problem?
mm,
Whatever the, plumbing, fitting, bathroom, like, can I help you out? Like, I'm gonna, I'm paying you the full wage, and I'll just be there to help you, and you can then help me out, learn things along the way. So
wow,
that's what I did for well, I mean, for a lot of it really, and then I feel like the last house I did pretty much everything myself,
wow, that's so cool.
minus like electrics and gas safe stuff.
Plumbing and things like that, they're a bit more technical.
Plumbing's not too bad, to be fair. These
Really?
days, plumbing is like you have, unless you're doing, so copper soldering is a little bit more risky of leaks, but then you have stuff called push fit, which is essentially like Lego for plumbing. It's like,
Mm,
cut
wow,
pipes to length and push it. And just don't be
mate, huge
stupid.
respect. My dad's a builder, so my first word was literally hammer. I came out hitting things, which is cool.
I just think there's
Um,
a massive satisfaction to creating something physically, uh,
yeah,
which is what building is. Uh,
which definitely takes us back to the studies. I think one of the things that I loved about the course that we did, product design or industrial design, was this level of ideation of bringing an idea to life and kind of going, okay, well, what's the goal here? What's the client's needs, and how can we create something in this team and then put it together physically, which is really quite a special thing.
yeah, I
So it's
mean,
lovely for you to be the client for yourself.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not the client because I'm not doing this for myself. Like I've never. The
Mm,
first house maybe a little bit, but the other two was like done as a business in terms of I'm renovating this to sell it. So it's not like,
mm,
but there's things you learn along the way, and certainly when you think about, so that the definition of what I would define industrial design, which is what we both did at university,
mm.
was like making the built environment more pleasurable, or making the so it's so broad, but and it is quite, you can be very clever, and just bad design is so horrible, um that good design is often unappreciated because of how well it's thought out.
Mm. Yeah. Were you ever afraid of messing things up?
In the house,
Yeah.
no, mostly because you just have, like, that's the thing, you just have to accept that you're gonna screw stuff up. um Nothing is impossible to fix, basically.
Yeah. It's quite interesting how you went from this realization, let's say, in the YouTube sphere of this huge competition and this huge quality coming out from other people, and I'm worried of my, let's say, expediency or expiry date, and then you go to something that's equally like stress inducing. It's like I'm going to fully dive in head first here and stress myself out with buying a house and tearing it down, which
Yeah,
is like huge respect, and it's really cool.
yeah.
Massive.
I mean, you know as long as you don't break stuff in a way that you can't live in it, you're only just going to have to deal with something that maybe doesn't look quite nice.
Mm. Mm. How have you dealt with the process on YouTube of going from this, like, I think it's safe to say, meteoric rise? You grew pretty quickly from what I saw, and it was quite an interesting time in maybe 4 or 5 years ago when you were really like becoming the bodyweight warrior, and then having this quite sustained business, let's say. And then I guess through whatever the last few years, you've kind of seen that, okay, there's now um, a stop maybe, or potentially something where you have to change lane.
It wasn't
How
even
has that
that there
been for
was a
you?
stop. It was more that I was like, what if? And then I was
Mm,
like, it was more like I need to learn something because,
mm,
or, it's just preparing for the future, whenever that may come. And it wasn't anything to do with how like things that were going badly. I was just like, I feel like I should know this. I don't want to have to learn it because I'm in a position where I have to. Like if I have the luxury of being able
mm.
to do both at the moment, which I did have, and then that skewed slightly more towards the building as I took on the last project, which was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um, the What was the original question?
How did you deal with the process of like the realization of the fear of like, oh,
Oh yeah,
what if?
yeah. I mean, I think it's just by doing. But
Yeah.
I guess also I kind of avoided there was two options. It was like not being sure whether I could compete, and then being like, well, I probably should get better at
Mm,
making videos or learn more or invest in myself in that way, or I build another skill. So it's like I guess I probably
mm,
made the wrong choice at the time, but it was the right choice. It gave me a much more of an appreciation of, I think, something that people who do fitness for a job don't necessarily understand, which is like people don't do fitness as a job.
mm,
And oftentimes the advice is like, oh, this is how I got jacked. Everyone's got to do like a couple hours a day, 5 days. Like people don't have the time
mm,
or the recovery capacity to do that. And yeah, so doing certainly, like I essentially worked um, a manual job. Yes, it was for myself for the past couple of years, and it gave me a much better appreciation of like, one, what's actually essential, because I have much less time. I'm going to spend much. I'm not going to waste my time on stuff that isn't useful or is faff or isn't adding to the overall progress. And then how to balance that with, um, yeah, with working and
mm,
like, and actually like, because I've got a lot of friends in this in the building space now, like plasterers, plumbers, and most of them, like, obviously they've given me advice and I end up giving them advice, and a lot of them were going to the gym and just
mm,
mostly to be fit and healthy. And I was like, just do a lot less. Like you'd be surprised, because they again were following the same advice that they need to be in the gym like 5 days a week. And I'm
mm,
like,
mm,
mate, you need to be doing a lot less. You're doing a manual job all day. You're working
mm.
hard. Like you don't need as much as you think.
Yeah. And do you think those kind of narratives will filter into your sharing on YouTube now?
Yeah, they absolutely have, and they have now.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
and I kind of made a video fairly recently, feeling like I was starting over again because I haven't really trained for the past like so this house took me 18 months to finish. I took it's like 6 months, and then took like a 4 or 5 months shorter break when I was able to move in and live here, to kind of organize my life again, and then another like 6 months stint. And yeah, so like I started off training, and at that point I was still doing a lot of one arm handstand, doing my normal training. It's probably like training maybe 8 hours a week ish, which is like a reasonable amount of time. And I was pulling down ceilings with crowbars and like just all of this work overhead, and then trying to train handstands at the same time. Like literally the month into it, doing some demolition stuff, and demolition, like removing things, is actually much more intense than, like, physically intense than building stuff.
Mm.
Um,
So much more fun.
sort of, when you until you realize you have to clear it up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that like I got tendonitis literally like a month into doing the build, and I was like, okay, well, I can't train handstands, so I have to go back. And then it was kind of like the first 6 months was a bit of a battle between like getting something that would stop me training, or just generally being fatigued from doing stuff that I wasn't able to train, and then trying to train again at the same level that I was doing beforehand.
Mm.
And then it was like this back and forth, and really just no consistency with it. And yeah, and then also just like the whole, I didn't have anywhere to live,
Yeah.
and the house that I
Yeah.
did have to live in was a complete mess. So I was like, many other different chaotic elements and a lack of order. So it was just very hard to train. And then probably the 3 months towards the end where I was like, okay, I can see the end process of this house being finished, which gave me the mental, like I knew but in the middle, I was like, as I said, I haven't been taught this. So I was a bit lost in the weeds and just trying to figure out how to get there. Once I knew the path, I could then put some training aside to training, and it was going well. I understood that I needed to do a lot less. I was actually training maybe like 4 times a week for just about half an hour each time. Short, sweet, not particularly complicated, not doing anything crazy, just doing some work and keeping things there. And then literally, like, as I finished doing all the renovation stuff, I had this like good little period of training where I was feeling a little bit stronger. I had a labrum tear on my shoulder, which was completely unrelated. It was like just I slipped. I was in a ditch, kind of with both hands either side of the ditch, and I just slipped and jolted my shoulder. Like it wasn't training, it wasn't anything stupid. It was just like one of those accidents that happen. And then
one of those life things just happens.
Yeah, like sometimes like I kind of really hate the bulletproof yourself from injury, because it's kind of, it's a little bit misrepresented, because out of all sports that we do, strength training is by far the least likelihood of training, like least likelihood of injury. Sorry, like if you compare it to sports like rugby, contact sports is massively more like injuries per 1,000 or whatever it is. Like strength training is one of the least, and it's often the one that's prescribed as a way to prevent injuries. But when we say prevent injuries, it's more like you're preparing your body for it. Like you're getting your body better at resisting forces, but like ultimately injuries will happen. There's nothing you can do that's going to bulletproof you from getting an injury. There's so many factors that go into why do we get injured, that shit just happens. Like you look at like professional sports like NBA, rugby, football. These guys have the best nutritionists, strength coaches, whatever it is. They train for a job and they still get injured. It just happens when you're pushing your body.
This podcast is currently a self-funded project. So if you're enjoying the conversations and would like to get involved in supporting us, please feel free to buy us a coffee and support us via Patreon. You can also give us a follow and share this with your friends, as it really helps us grow. To see our coaching, courses, and event offers, please visit our website, www.figuringthingsout.com. For now, back to the podcast.
What's your thoughts on like anti-fragility as opposed to bulletproofing? Because I think bulletproofing is more like a sales term. I kind of see it as a sales term. It's like, here's a cool term that's going to help sell this thing, right? Whereas anti-fragility seems to be more like a philosophical like term or idea that's actually moving towards an interesting direction of kind of how our bodies adapt naturally, and maybe aiming to use that further or push that further. For example, let's say in your life you have a lot more. I think one of the reasons why strength training has a lower per 1,000 injury rate would be that it is quite a static sport comparative to rugby, let's say. But obviously, life isn't static. Life is very much like we have times where we might trip, or for whatever reason we may stumble, or in a car crash. I wonder, what's your perspective on adding some of that type of work into a strength training program, like a bit more of a, let's say, dynamic stability or volatility, or what amount of someone's training do you think it's valuable, if any, to do some whatever you take as anti-fragility training? Or do you think just like your standards, your basics, let's say, are enough?
So I understand what you're saying, and I would generally agree. I think in the case of rugby, it's comparing it to, say, Olympic lifting or something like that, weightlifting. It's probably not a fair example, because you've got other aspects that are going to cause you injury, as opposed to, like, most of the time with weight training, or people just training and getting injuries through their practice, it's usually self-inflicted or accidental. So something so I would categorize injuries as we've got like trauma injuries and we've got overuse injuries. So trauma injury would be like you got hit in the face playing rugby or hit in the head, or you dislocate a shoulder tackling somebody. I broke my nose playing rugby years ago. I still can't smell properly. But yeah, like all of these things is like cool. There's probably little that doing some anti-fragility work would have done to save that. Same as like falling down the stairs and breaking your arm. Like maybe if you're vegan or if you're vegetarian versus if you're getting adequate K2 calcium and stuff, maybe for strength training your bone density is going to be higher. So there's other factors that are going to play into that, but how much of a percentage that makes into those sort of injuries, I don't know. In terms of like, I presume you're kind of going down the angle of like the bend so you don't break sort of thing, like the willow tree versus the oak tree in the breeze, and maybe just like exposing yourself to vulnerable positions in your training. I think there's definitely good arguments to be made for it. Certainly, like I think flexibility training kind of does that in a structured way. Strength training through ranges. I'll give you an example. I remember years ago, I was surfing with my dad, and he like tore his hamstring because he stepped off his surfboard, and his torso hinged forward, his foot stayed there. He went into like extreme hamstring stretch, and it was like tear because there was no flexibility there. Whether you had adequate flexibility in your hamstrings, would that happen? I don't know. It's quite a rapid deacceleration that's occurring. Probably would have helped. So yeah, I think there's an element of preparedness that you can provide your body for day to day. Sure, doing some stability stuff.
Yeah.
But like where do you draw the line? I don't think we should be doing shit on Bosu balls. Like squatting on a Bosu ball isn't stability training. It's just pointless. Whereas like on the same aspects, like having absolutely zero stability with your training and getting super strong with something like a leg press and being able to chuck 400 500 kilos on a leg press for some reason, it's just like, well, that's kind of stupid as well. You can have both in your training. I think body weight is a nice combination of both, because you're having to control your body through space oftentimes, whereas weight training, if you're using machines, you're not going to be limited by your ability to control a movement, rather than like the ability for your muscle to produce force, which is great for hypertrophy, but probably not great for overall movement quality, as opposed to like bodyweight training or just free weights in general, where you have to control them through a range of motion. There's going to be an element of like your body's ability to dynamically stabilize that will limit you in a position.
Yeah, I think so. I think for me, it's more like just giving myself a buffer system or buffer zone where I've got like my primary pattern that I'm aiming for, and then some deviation that I feel safe to do so. And I think this is maybe the more important area to focus on rather than bulletproofing or extremes. It's like, hello, Miss Little Puppy. We have a dog on the screen. I got distracted. She's so cute.
Yeah.
She's got plenty of buffer all around her ears. Look at that hair. Great. Let's move on to your own training. So what kind of things are you doing now? So after you've finished the renovations, you're now moving towards kind of selling the house and moving back to, I presume, some type of normative life for a while?
Sort of. I mean, I'm still going to be homeless, but apart from that side of things, yes, more normal. As in, it's not even normal. It's like more that I just have time and energy to dedicate to training, and it's not like I haven't been doing everything that I was doing beforehand. It's just that I had a large amount of stress from it, something else that wasn't just running this as a business.
How do you deal with your own expectations of, here's where I was previously, and you go into a new training phase and you're like, okay, I need to beat this, and it's like, well, actually you've had 2 years or 3 years of a very different life than where you were.
Mate, that's probably been the biggest realization for the past couple of years. I think especially like probably I had a period of time for about 6 months in between, like, as I mentioned to you earlier about like I'd train, I'd get sort of something bad would happen, I wouldn't train, and then I'd try to be training at the level. And it was like this back and forth. And that was that kind of ego, I guess, like you want to be training at a certain level. Also like the fact that I do this as a job. And if I'm, I think there's a certain level of competence required. And not being able to do a certain thing after being able to do it probably doesn't look great from that perspective. So there was like, an element of why should I be giving out advice if I can't follow it myself? And, so I think that's fair enough. But it wasn't really like, and that was like a big mental struggle for me, because I take what I do very seriously in the sense that I'm not making YouTube videos to be like, hey, look at me, I'm really good. Like I genuinely, I want to help people. I'm not going to be the best at whatever it is that I do. That's not really the motivation for why I do it. I like teaching. I always have done. And I think to be a good teacher, you have to spend time in the trenches. But yeah, like certainly I wanted to think that I was leading by example through teaching. I didn't have to be the best, but I had to at least stick to the stuff that I think is important and show that it can be done, or I can do it. And yeah, and I guess feeling like I wasn't able to do that felt like a lack of authenticity. And I felt like I let people down. And it wasn't really until I was able to, I made a video that was like, just basically trying to be honest and be like, look, I kind of fucked up with my training and everything that I was doing. I got distracted doing something else. This is where I'm at. And that was like, I think just acknowledging that, I guess maybe it's different for certain people. You don't have, if you're not doing this for a job, you don't have a platform. There's really no reasons to it. But even just like if you can kind of acknowledge it to yourself, certainly, and just be like, okay, I'm not there. And that's been like, I'm fine with that now. Like I don't care too much. And the attitude to training has been completed. I don't feel too disheartened that I've dropped quite a bit. One, because I know I can get back there. And two, just because I'm happy to train. I'm like, I up until doing these projects, I didn't appreciate how important the training was in terms of like, I've always, for the past decade, I've trained to some degree. I've done more when I wasn't feeling so good. I was adding more flexibility work. I was doing more work. Like I found a way that I was feeling great. And it wasn't for the absence of that training over the past couple of years. I was like, oh shit, this stuff really is useful. So yeah, I have an appreciation for not just taking for granted, like having that ability, and having the time to train and having that energy. Yeah. So yeah, I'm just grateful at the moment to to be where I am, basically.
Yeah, massive respect, mate. I think it's really brave to be able to share on some level of vulnerability when you have such a big audience, and then be like, hey guys, so you know that the things that I was sharing, I also wasn't able to follow myself. And so I do think that's really valuable. I wish politicians would do the same.
Yeah, man.
and would kind of level with everyone and be some type of human rather than some kind of like weird pseudo robot alien. It's like,
I know, the inability to make a mistake.
Yeah. And it's like, that's not human. If you're able to really accept, hey, you know what, I'm sorry guys, I messed up, or I didn't quite do what I said I was going to do, but I'm here and I want to do something. I think that's where Russell Brand, interestingly, has done quite well for himself, is he's really been able to make some massive fuck ups and then come back and kind of acknowledge them and work through them, which I think is really interesting. What I wanted to also say was, going backwards to our humble beginnings, me and you getting to know each other, it was very much like we used to speak about the training as, oh, we're two really tall, lanky guys. Like, how are you doing this? How am I doing this? And it's really great for me to see that your rise through sharing information from that perspective as well, of like, I'm a tall guy and I'm heavy and I can still do this because of this, this, and this. And you were evidently conscientious in like the material and reading about everything, basically. And I think it's really nice to then have almost like a full circle and kind of go, okay, here's a guy that was super motivated. He was really conscientious. He improved to a really high level. And then life kind of happened. And he was able to then accept, oh, you know what? I kind of fell off from where I was. And now I'm going through this process of kind of working out, well, where am I now? And I think that resonates a lot. I feel very similar.
I just think, uh, meaning is only meaning of whatever you're doing. There's no inherent meaning to doing handstands or like, okay, yes, we can go down to like, oh yeah, it's good for your health, not handstands, but like training in general, moving, it's good for your health, uh, etc. But I think there's an element that loses meaning towards it. So I think understanding why you do something is super valuable, and that's the thing that keeps, if you have values, it doesn't really matter how motivated you are or a lot of other external factors. um you know I value doing some form of training, or and a lot of it for me, as I mentioned earlier, like comes down to accountability, or just like I do this so I can be better at the thing that I do, which is my job, like YouTube and sharing. And that's for me is a massive accountability. Like that's a good reason for doing it. If I was then not able to find the motivation to train or to do something, like what about the person who's just doing it for fun whilst they have, they're doing a normal job, they've got mortgages to pay, they've got family, they've got like shit, man. That's worth looking into, because ultimately, like you and I know as coaches, the most important thing is that you do something consistently. These short bursts are really just, you don't get the benefit. Like everything is rented to some extent. You can get a nice physique, but then you still have to keep training to maintain that physique. You can achieve a move, but you still have to keep training to unlock the move. Um, you use it or lose it at the end of the day. And understanding how we can better help people continue to just show up regardless of what's going on in their life, and get the benefits that they need from training, or movement, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Then that's the most important thing.
Interesting quote. Everything is rented. I think I like it. It's cool. One thing that I always go through, and the narratives that I struggle with sometimes, is my passion being my job, and kind of having these pressures, let's say, to perform, to share, what people might see as a goal for themselves in me, and having these types of outside pressures that I wouldn't usually have if I just trained for a passion. And I wonder if you obviously, it sounds like you have something of that, and I wonder, how do you reflect on that? Do you go through that process, and have you figured anything out from that? Do you find it troublesome at all?
Sort of. I think from the perspective, like as I said earlier, like you're essentially a walking advertisement. Certainly, like if this is, if anyone who is actually just a PT, not necessarily online, but like in real life, and you're working with clients, you need to kind of show that you practice what you preach. Like your body, the things you can do, how you look. People make judgments based on that. So there definitely is a pressure there, which I guess takes away somewhat from the enjoyment of it. But then I think if you go down that way, there can just be like a frustration that ends up ruining the passion more than anything. It's just like, oh, why can't I get better, or why can't I do X, Y, and Z, as opposed to like, and that that over time does ruin the enjoyment. I feel like I'm in a different headspace at the moment. I definitely was like there a while ago, whereas recently I feel kind of relieved from that pressure. I couldn't tell you as to why. I think the fact that I was able to be honest with people online about where I was, and up until that point, I was feeling very frustrated with myself, and it was ruining my enjoyment of training because I wasn't able to be, again, I just think like accepting kind of where things are. You can't lie about these things. you're only really lying to yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I just keep coming back to like it's just something that I need to do for like it's something that I'm gonna do for the rest of my life. Like there's no point me just continuing to fuck up my own circumstance in terms of like trying to train at a level that I'm not able to access, or
Mm.
putting myself at risk as well in terms of like most of the time I've got injured is probably just me being doing stupid stuff.
Mm. Mm.
So it's like I don't know, it just comes
Yeah.
down to what you value. Like, I want to be able to do this for as long as I can.
Mm. Going to let's say, speaking on that point of I value training and I really want to do it, but maybe sometimes I don't find the time or I just don't get round to doing it. When you've been busy, what kind of things have you done to support yourself, like to make training the lowest hanging fruit it can possibly be?
So my thing really, the main thing that for me is just getting outside. And like even now, I haven't trained at a gym for 2 years. Maybe occasionally, like if I'm in London, I'm working, but like I don't really train at gyms. As much as I can, I set up my training so I can be outside. So the equipment is minimal, and I can do it wherever, whenever. So massively, and also like I train in my back garden. Like reducing, I don't have to travel 15 minutes to go to the gym, get changed, do whatever. Like I can reduce as many barriers as possible to just doing training. And I understand that is hard for some people because some people just don't have the mentality. Like they need to go into a different space to do their training, which is fair enough. But yeah, for me, reducing barriers to training at home, training outside. I walk my dog every day. So that is quite a good opportunity to do some sort of exercise. The accountability then is also not on me. I need to take my dog for a walk because she needs a walk. She deserves a walk. So, one, I'm at least getting about an hour of walking in. Usually I'll pass some trees or there'll be some bars or something. I'll do some push-ups. This is what I do every day anyway. At the moment, I have it's actually a little bit stolen from somebody called Joel Jameson, who's a conditioning coach. He got a very good book, MMA conditioning, a couple of courses as well. He's great for just general conditioning. He's got something called a high performance recovery day, which is essentially like a 40-minute sort of activity. It involves 5 to 10 minutes of breathing, 10 to 20 minutes of like a low intensity aerobic capacity sort of style of training. Couple of exercises that you do for some reps, low intensity, minimal kind of eccentric loading, so minimal muscle damage, and a little bit of flexibility stuff, and that's about it. So
Nice.
for me, at the moment, that looks like a dog walk. I might do some breathing whilst I'm walking. You can do like the pace breathing. So inhale for 4 steps, exhale for 6 steps. I don't do this for particularly long, but it's kind of nice. Like it's actually kind of like a mindfulness sort of thing. And especially like I've tried meditation in the past. I get the benefits of it, but like having it whilst doing something is much more engaging, or I'm much more likely to do it. So yeah, or just trying to nasal breathe the entire time. Try not to mouth breathe. As I said, I broke my nose when I played rugby, so I struggle with that one. So yeah, doing some sort of breathing. I keep walking the dog. I'll pass some bars. I might do some pull-ups or some rows or some push-ups. Nothing hard, or some squats. And then usually on the walk, I might do some like tempo intervals, which is kind of like some really basic zone 2 training, where you're basically trying to keep your heart rate between like maybe 120, 140, like nothing that's pushing the ability to have a conversation. And that just looks like running for like 10, 20 seconds and then active recovery walking in between. So like running it, not an easy jog, running at a moderate pace. So like it elevates the heart rate, active recovery until the heart rate comes down to like 120 running. So it's like we're kind of bouncing back and forth, but I'm not having to run the entire time.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if you were very fit, you could, well, not even very fit, you can just do a very easy jog for like 10 to 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But that kind of covers a lot.
Yeah. One thing that I love to do is like old standard like fartlek training, and it's something I do semi-regularly for myself when I need to blow off some steam. I've been focusing on something for too long, or I'm feeling a certain emotion that I want to just like shake off.
Mhm.
I'll go to like a local park and I'll just like do fartlek, and I'll give myself very simple objectives. I'll say, okay, from here to that lamppost, I'm going to walk super slowly and just relax. And then from that lamppost to that tree, I'm then going to sprint as fast as I possibly can. And then I'm going to do nasal breathing, like 50% of my total speed, just easy peasy to that tree over there. And then I'm going to sprint through those goalposts backwards and forwards 10 times, and then whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And just whatever I feel in that moment, from that small objective to that small objective. And it goes from me being like, oh, in myself, to then having like a half an hour plus run that's actually quite engaging. And it's almost like you set one small task, one small objective, and it rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls. And I allow myself to also do like lunges, or like you said, like if I find a branch or a goalpost I can hang from, I might say, okay, I'm going to be here for a minute. And this is a really accessible, low-hanging fruit as well that I really like to do.
Yeah, I just think like it's built into my day for one. It's no extra time, and like it's fun for the dog. We go different places and do
That's
stuff.
true.
And I if I was more into running, I like the idea of just going for like an exploration sort of run. So there's no like intention. It's just like you're trying to move a bit faster through a space, and that's just massive for like coordination, aerobic capacity. There's like so many benefits. You almost gamifying it. I actually had a conversation with Adam Schnitsky, the pioneer, and he was talking about like gamifying running and how like just going for a run on a straight bit of tarmac is very monotonous and boring, but like going exploring with the intention of moving quickly rather than running is like you're having to dodge branches, jump over trees. Like it's exciting, like it's fun. It's like what kids would do when you go to a park or something,
Yeah. I used to do it so much.
The other thing I wanted to mention, as I was saying, that I kind of didn't think was just don't be idealistic with your training, just be realistic. If you know you're going to be busy, don't beat yourself up that you can't adhere to like a perfect training plan. Just be like, something is better than nothing. And Mondays I'm going to do like 20 pull-ups and that's it. Tuesday I do, have like a scratch list over the week. Have like a list of I need to do this amount of stuff. Whenever you find time, try to get it done.
And then really, and also give that positive feedback to yourself, like, good job, I actually did it. Yes.
Like the worst thing in the world from a motivation perspective is writing or prescribing yourself to do a certain amount of activity, or just prescribing yourself anything and then not meeting it. Always give yourself have a lower expectation of what you can do and either do it or surpass it. And it's like, cool. The motivation will then fill itself after that point.
I think expectation is huge related to motivation and progression moving forward. If you have misaligned or malaligned expectations, good luck. It's a killer. It's really a killer.
It only lasts so long.
Let's move back to injury, because I know something that we've discussed over but haven't really dove into. So you've had a couple of shoulder injuries in the last couple of years.
Mate, I've royally fucked myself up in many ways.
It's part of the territory. I think this is also the issue with doing your passion for a job, is that if you push your passion too hard, the likelihood of injury increases, and then you're injured for your job.
To some extent, it's also in my personality. When you asked me about housing, and then you're like, are you afraid to mess something up? I was like, no, because I know I can fix it. And the same thing kind of applied to my body. Still kind of applies to my body. Like, try something. If I fuck myself up, I learn from it. I probably wouldn't do those things again.
It's a process. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I also think guys are probably more susceptible to this than females. Is like, we just do stupid things sometimes. And hopefully as we get older, we learn to not do as many of those stupid things.
What kind of things have you done to help yourself through that process?
I don't know if this is a help, but like I understand, relatively speaking, rehabbing quite well, more because I've had to do it more times than I'd like to admit. So I know I don't necessarily, like, injuries happen. I don't necessarily stress, and I'm very good at modifying training so that I can always do something, which is probably the big. I know this isn't necessarily answering your question, but the biggest thing that people mistake with training is like, I'm just gonna take a week's rest. Like, maybe that does some help, depending on what the injury is. Break your arm, probably needs a little bit of rest. But for like most people who just like tweak something or strain something, like actually taking complete rest is probably one of the worst things that you can do. Because when we train over a period of time, like generally speaking, our activity will increase and so will our capacity to do work. So somebody who's been training for a couple of years will have a level to tolerate the amount of exercise they can do, and the amount of exercise they'll do be at a certain level. Like you don't get to a certain level without committing a certain amount of time. When you get injured and you take rest, your obviously your capacity, your activity exceeds your capacity. That's one explanation as to why we get injured. If we then rest, our capacity will go down, and then maybe we come back like 2 weeks time and we're like, oh, I'll try and do something that I was doing beforehand. See how it feels. Like rest doesn't really solve that problem. It just means that our injuries are gone down. We're not necessarily psychologically adapt to know where our abilities lie, and then we'll probably try to train, and then you just risk the likelihood of re-injury in this kind of cycle repeating where you're kind of going down in capacity, and et cetera, et cetera. The best thing to do is to do some form of training and to focus on building up the capacity of that injured area. And it doesn't need to be too complicated. It can literally just be like, just try and do some movements at very low intensity, figure out the ranges that hurt and the ranges that are okay. You can keep doing the ones that are okay. The ones that hurt, find a level that you can do that doesn't hurt that much. Start with isotonic, so isometric, static sort of positions. It's going to cause the least amount of muscle damage. It's also something that is very scalable to an injured area, because like, okay, say for example, I've injured my shoulder and it hurts for me to do push-ups. So probably continuing to do push-ups with pain is not the best of ideas. But what I could do is I could scale that push-up. So I could elevate my hand so it becomes easy if the injury is not too bad. Or I could go against the wall and I could try to do a push-up against the wall. The wall is an immovable object, hopefully, providing the house is built well.
Depends on your houses.
Yeah. And then I'm going to try and push against that wall. Because I'm injured and because I'm not going anywhere, I can just basically push within my limit. I can apply as much force as I feel is beneficial for the injury. And it's very self-contained. The only issue with it is it's not particularly like measurable, but like I can try and just apply force, contract the area, relax.
Yeah.
It's not gonna put me at a point in which is risky. It's not gonna cause the injury to get any worse. It's just gonna get you used to working that muscle. But yeah, basically just, the biggest thing with injuries is just scaling and finding a way to continue training without making it worse. And having the confidence that your body's going to get better, because it will do. It's not stupid. Injuries are very frustrating, but it's not the end of the world. In terms of preventing them, honestly, the biggest thing for me has just been doing less stupid stuff. And also understanding that nothing is inherently dangerous. Lack of preparation is. So if, for example, a friend is like, oh, let's post something on Instagram, just do some splits. And I haven't warmed up and maybe I haven't entered splits for a couple of weeks or something, like I'm probably just not going to do that now. Like the cost benefit analysis is very small. Like there's nothing in it for me. Whereas if I'd been training splits a lot and I was feeling very confident, maybe I'd have a different attitude to it.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any things you do on the flip side? So like soft tissue work or any type of changes to nutrition, or I know you've been doing some kind of sauna work lately.
Yeah. In terms of difference to injuries, I don't really do much. I used to do a bit more soft tissue work. I haven't done soft tissue work in a long time, since kind of when I read more into the literature around it, it did appear that it doesn't really do much. But there certainly is like a perceived benefit to soft tissue work. So I'm not really sure where I feel like I dropped it completely and I was like, it's kind of pointless. It doesn't do anything. And then I've come back around and being like, well, there is kind of more of a psychological benefit to soft tissue work. So if it feels good, feel free to do it. Sometimes I will do some like, I quite like the Travell and Simmons trigger point therapy stuff. They've got a couple of books on trigger point mapping. There's also a great website called Trigger Points. I think it's triggerpoints.net, and it literally is like just a map of the body, and you can find all the trigger points for whatever particular area you're looking at. I like those. I think they work nicely.
I actually love like a basic massage as well. Like not even like a trigger point and like sometimes I think when people hear like tissue therapy, let's say, or whatever it may be, manual therapy, it's almost like, yeah, you have to crush the muscle and bash it like a steak and it's going to be all tender and lovely. And actually, I feel like the relationship with the nervous system is far more important. And if you're getting adverse effects of like excess tension because something's being bashed and bruised, maybe
you don't
it's
need
the
somebody
best
to
way.
then like crush you even more and
Yeah,
you're kind of wincing in pain. Like that's not going to
Yeah,
create
right. I I had this horrendous physio experience once where this guy was like, I'm going to show you who's boss. Like, you're a big guy. Watch this. I'm going to make you hurt.
Mhm.
And I just thought it was so unnecessary. He thought he could bash my pain away.
Mhm.
And it just completely exacerbated everything that was wrong. And then I went to someone else and they were really calm and they made me feel safe and they were put me in a space of, okay, I think I can relax here. And then they worked with me in such a low level and it gave me such a different experience. And I think, yes, there's not that much literature on like physiological changes literally in the tissue, but I think the relationship to the nervous system and allowing like a regaining towards that zero, that kind of like easy stasis of the body is actually super important. That's a big step in injury prevention or rehab that people maybe miss is how can I just come back to normal, neutral?
Yeah, I should probably clarify that point of like, from an injury recovery perspective, like massage isn't going to solve your problems. But yeah, like on a psychological level,
Sure.
just being touched by another person, even though just having
dude.
a hug or something, you know, how good that makes you feel if you're having a bad day or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's something for me that I don't feel like I need, so I don't do it. But I understand that it does help.
You don't like a hug?
Yeah. Yeah.
Take it or leave it. Dude, you've got a puppy.
I know, mate. She's extremely cuddly as well. I like red light therapy. I think red light therapy is great, but also I'm like, well, 50%, 40% of the light from outside, it's the sun, is going to be also infrared, near infrared. So yeah, skin in the game, getting outside. And also like if you want to buy a red light device, there's also a good option. I think the evidence for that is still emerging, but still pretty good. And certainly I've found anecdotally that I'm on and off with this, but on the occasions where I have used red light therapy on injured areas, it feels like that injury has got better faster than I would have perceived it to. Again, just personal experience. But I think there's some inherent benefit there. But yeah, sunshine as well is huge. I would say the usual, you know, collagen, all of that sort of stuff. I have, again, anecdotal evidence, but I've noticed that people who are vegan, vegetarian that I've coached tend to get injured more often than those who aren't. I think there is, you know, certainly things like glycine, as we mentioned about sort of bone-related K2 that you're going to get from animals that you're not going to get from plant sources.
What about this hot box you've got? You've made this
the sauna.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I love the sauna. I think from a recovery perspective, like as I mentioned, that high performance recovery session that the Joel Jameson one, one of the main things is like just pumping blood around the body massively helps recovery. That's why like aerobic capacity stuff helps recovery. Sauna is essentially doing that, but statically. So there's again some good evidence that like actually comparatively speaking for cardiovascular health, there's benefits that are similar to running for the same amount of time. Just when you run, you get loading on tissue, whereas in sauna you're getting heat. Also, sauna is, again, for those that live in low light or poor light areas, is a source of infrared heat. So it helps from that respect. But yeah, like, and then you have the benefit of, I don't know why, I'm not a scientist or an expert, but like, yeah, there's an anti-inflammatory benefit from heat shock proteins as well with sauna. But I think similar to massage, like doing sauna, cold water, it doesn't even need to be cold water, it's just like something cool sauna, like it feels very good. Yeah. And very relaxing as well. So I'm a big fan. I first went over to Finland in 2020. Went to Helsinki. I was at like a biohacking conference that I got invited to. And honestly, I probably only went to about like 50% of it, and I spent the rest of the time just going to these different sauna places because I went to one and I was like, this is fucking cool.
Yeah. Some cultures are amazing, right? How they just have that ingrained totally in their culture. Like every week they'll be going as a family, and then
Yeah.
so great.
So
It's so cool.
it's somewhat as far as I'm aware, I've chatted to a few people about this, and in the UK, we were quite quick to have plumbing in people's properties. So we would have, people would have baths in their homes as opposed to the need to go to a communal baths, and that happened sooner than later in the UK. Obviously, like bathing actually has been quite a big thing in the UK from Roman times. You can go to Bath and see the Roman baths. You got Hampstead Heath. There's so many, like it was a big part of culture, and then I think the UK in particular has just kind of ended up going a bit to this kind of like you have your house and your space a bit sooner. But certainly in Europe, that's not so much of a thing. And I think as well, like part of it is to do with you see it in cultures that have the least amount of sunlight, or certainly the cold conditions, and that there is an element that like that infrared heat is replacing the desire for sunlight, especially like in winter months. Like you imagine if we go back several 100,000 years, whatever, and you're trying to get clean and you live in a place like Finland in winter, like you're not going to go and swim and bath in a lake. It's just not going to happen because you're going to freeze to death and die. So the sauna is like actually a place of cleanliness and bathing and originally.
And social support. I think one factor maybe we glossed over on recovery or the process therein is gaining some sense of social support and gaining what you lose if you can't train. I think a lot of people will socially be active a lot. They'll play sport, for example.
Go to a class, yeah.
And if you lose that via an injury, it's really important to somehow try and maintain some sense of social connection or support, I think.
Or just know that other people have gone through it and have been okay.
Yeah, for sure. You've got a new podcast, I noticed. Is it in the sauna you're doing it?
Yeah. It's kind of like a podcast, but then the last bit is a sauna and then like cold. So the idea is like to put the guest through some sort of discomfort,
Okay, nice.
Make sure they've got skin in the game, and they'd give it a go. It's been fun, to be fair.
It's like that. There's one podcast kind of show on YouTube. They have the hot sauce, and they're kind of like suffering, and some people absolutely sink, and some people swim and do so well. It's so cool. Yeah. It's a great idea.
Hot ones. It's actually the podcast called Hot Seat, so I guess it's kind of in name. But that same sort of principle is like, I mean, to be honest, like most of the podcasts are just sat chatting, but it's nice to see people suffer a little bit at the end.
For sure, yeah, especially for us viewers. That's what we're there for.
Exactly.
So I'd love to kind of round out today with a couple of quick fire questions. First one: massage or sauna?
Well, it's sauna. Only because I don't want to pay the money for somebody to give me a massage. I'm happy just to sit in the sauna.
Cold plunge or cold shower?
I would say cold plunge, usually because you can go out in nature and go do it. So like sea swim or go in a lake or something.
Good answer. My answer was cold shower until you said that. When you add nature, it's quite nice. How about cold shower in nature?
I mean, part of the renovations that I did, I ended up doing a bathroom during the November lockdown we had in the UK, and I was showering at the gym whilst I was doing that, and then the gym's closed and I had nowhere to shower, so I was just like hose pipe outside in
Back to
November.
roots.
But it was quite nice. It was enjoyable.
Yeah. Pull-ups or dips?
Pull-ups.
You're a strong puller. One-arm chin-up or one-arm handstand?
One-arm handstand. One-arm chin-up hurt me in many ways.
It hurt you? In what way? Emotionally?
It was the original reason for like I had given like it was one of the original reasons for giving myself elbow tendonitis, which plagued me for a while. And I just think again the cost benefit ratio is not high enough to warrant it.
You used to climb a lot, didn't you?
I did, yeah, and I stopped climbing because of my one-arm chin-up injury.
It's a shame. Squats or deadlifts?
I'm going to say squats now, but I would have said deadlifts up until about a year ago.
Interesting. Kindle or a good old-fashioned book?
good old-fashioned book, absolutely.
I got a Kindle recently because I was traveling quite a lot, and it's really good. It means it opens up so many more avenues of low-hanging fruit regarding reading when you're away.
Sure.
But I do miss the smell and the texture of a good old book. It's a shame, really. But
yeah, I like coffee in the sun in the morning with a book is like a happy place.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be the same with a Kindle.
Yeah, they are quite good, but yeah, you're right. What are you afraid of?
Probably losing meaning for doing things, becoming nihilistic.
Yeah.
I guess that would be what I'm afraid of.
Doing
Having gone for a period of like the last 6-month period in between doing all this, I was like kind of lost in what I was doing. It's like it's just it's not a nice place to exist.
Mm.
And meaning is, I think, unless as we've become more agnostic atheist, meaning has become, if you're going to be an existentialist, meaning has become more self-determined. So one, it gives you a lot of freedom, but then there's also kind of like a pressure to find meaning in things when there isn't inherent meaning from like religion or other things.
Yeah.
So yeah, having meaning to do stuff, having purpose.
Nice. What brings you joy?
I think genuinely just being outside. Like I've said, that's the thing I value most, probably. Being able to get outside. That's why it pains me living in the UK.
Saying that, I've climbed a fair bit in Europe outdoors.
Sure.
And until last year, I'd never climbed outdoors in the UK.
What?
And I went on a mission to then start to explore the UK and climb a bit more outdoors. And it's so great. This weather, I was out up in Sheffield last weekend and it rained the whole weekend. So I didn't get to climb. But on the whole, stunning scenery. I think the UK has some amazing nature.
I do agree as well.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot more time in Scotland over the last couple of years. And Scotland's absolutely epic. You just kind of take the fact that you're going to have bad weather with the good weather, but as long as you're like properly prepared, it's not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah.
We do have good nature. You just have to make the effort to get out and see it, and just accept it's not going to be like sandy beaches. Well, there are sandy beaches in the sun, but it's different sort of nature.
Yeah. Well, mate, that was it for today. Thank you so much for being here. Where can everyone find you if they can't find you already?
I post mainly on YouTube. That's kind of where I focus most of my energy in terms of sharing information. And that would just be my name, Tom Merrick, or Bodyweight Warrior. And then I sometimes share on Instagram as well, more for fun and own personal stuff as well.
Lovely. Tom, thank you so much, mate.
And there we have it, yet another episode in the bag. I am currently laying under a blanket trying to get the best sound I can possibly get for you, so please consider listening on. If you didn't know already, we have a Patreon. Join now for the price of a coffee and gain creative insights, bonus content, interviews, and the chance to ask questions to our upcoming guests. If you're new here, here's a little bit more about the concept of our podcast. Have you ever heard of the metaphor of the 5 blind folk and the elephant? It's the inspiration and idea that drives this podcast, and it goes something like this. There are 5 blind folk walking through the jungle. They stumble upon an obstacle. The first one steps forward, touches its leg, and goes, it feels like a giant tree. The next one steps up, feels the trunk, and goes, no, I think it's a giant snake. They each have a turn, trying to feel what the hell this obstacle is. And it's only when they put all 5 together, they understand that it's actually an elephant in their way. These differing perspectives and then this overarching clarity is the inspiration that we love and feel is important to get through with this podcast. In this way, the blind folk are our guests, each with their own perspectives and ideas. The elephant is our series topic that we explore from these perspectives to gain a greater insight. If this is your first episode, why not check out the others in this series to gain a greater understanding of this topic? or check out the previous series where we explored the concept of movement culture and training. As always, it really helps us if you like and share this with your friends and family. We're a self-funded project, just trying to open up interesting conversations with interesting individuals for you guys to listen to. Thank you, and keep figuring things out.